Chapter 1. The Junkyard Find. Jonas McCabe had always been a man who sought value in what others considered trash. As a mechanic who specialized in spaceship repairs, he had an uncanny ability to see potential in objects most would discard. His freighter, a beat-up old light fighter-class ship named the Lone Star, had been pieced together from countless wrecks over the years. Yet, despite the constant patchwork, it was his home, the one thing he owned in the universe that wasn't just a memory of someone else's failure. On the dusty planet of Vexen, tucked away in the farthest reaches of the Outer Rim, lay Zarly's Junkyard. The scrapyard stretched over several miles, a graveyard of obsolete ships, broken engines, and abandoned technologies. For a mechanic like Jonas, it was paradise, a place where old starships and parts were strewn about like ancient ruins, each offering up the possibility of something useful, something that could breathe life back into a forgotten piece of spacefaring history. Jonas had been wandering the yard for hours, picking through heaps of scrap and rusted components, looking for the last few parts he needed to make his Lone Star fully operational. The ships here were cheap, but finding the right one could make all the difference between having a fully functional craft and just another wreck to patch up. It wasn't until the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the piles of scrap, that Jonas stumbled upon what could only be described as pure serendipity. Buried deep under an old freighter hull, half concealed by scrap metal and cables, was a ship that Jonas had only seen in the oldest star charts, the Chiton cruiser. Once considered a luxury-class starship, it was renowned for its sleek design and incredible long-range capabilities. The Chiton's streamlined shape stood out, even among the disassembled wrecks around it. Its metallic skin still gleamed, despite the years of neglect. Jonas squinted in disbelief as he approached it. The ship was half buried, but its structure remained largely intact, with only a few superficial dents and damage from years of being left to rot. The Chiton cruiser had been discontinued decades ago, a rare collector's item among space enthusiasts, and there it was, forgotten and forsaken in a junkyard. But to Jonas, it wasn't a treasure to be kept. It was a project, something he could fix, restore, and sell for a fortune. "How did you end up here?" Jonas muttered to himself, running his fingers along the ship's hull, feeling the familiar warmth of metal under his touch. His mind was already racing, running through a list of the repairs and modifications it would need. But as he crawled around the ship, making mental notes, something caught his eye, a faint, almost imperceptible glow from the ship's cockpit window. Jonas froze. At first, he thought it was just the reflection of the setting sun, but then the glow intensified, and a shadow passed across the window. Jonas instinctively reached for his blaster, but then quickly reconsidered. What was he doing? It's probably just a trick of the light, he thought. However, the feeling in his gut told him otherwise. There was something inside. He cautiously approached the cockpit, his boots crunching against the ground, his eyes scanning every inch of the wreck for movement. The ship was silent, save for the faint hum of some forgotten systems still active, maybe running on some emergency power reserves. His heart beat a little faster as he reached the entrance. The door of the cockpit was ajar, and with a careful hand, Jonas pushed it open. His eyes widened as the interior of the ship came into view. There, slumped against the dashboard, was a figure, a person. But not just any person. The being in front of him was alien. Not just any alien, this one was a young woman with features he hadn't seen before. Her skin was a soft violet color, smooth and almost metallic, reflecting the dim light. Her hair was long and silver, flowing down her back like shimmering strands of liquid mercury. Her eyes were closed, and she seemed to be in some form of stasis. Despite the eerie silence of the ship, Jonas felt a strange pull toward her. He stepped closer, his heart racing. She was wearing a suit, something that appeared advanced, possibly a protective uniform for space travel. She looked fragile, as though time had taken a heavy toll on her. It was clear that she wasn't dead, not yet. She was unconscious. Jonas hesitated for only a moment before kneeling beside her, checking for signs of life. To his relief, he found a faint pulse, and she was still breathing, albeit shallowly. "What the hell?" Jonas muttered, shaking his head. He wasn't equipped to treat alien physiology, but there was something in him that urged him to help. He quickly opened his med kit and administered a dose of a stabilizer he carried on his ship. Her breathing slowed, but she didn't stir. After a few moments of deliberation, Jonas made a decision. He couldn't leave her here. Whoever she was, she needed help, and whether or not she'd want it, he wasn't going to walk away from someone in need. Jonas didn't think about the consequences. He didn't think about what the Chiton cruiser could be hiding, or why an alien woman would be here in the first place. He just knew he had to get her out of the wreck and back to his ship. After carefully moving her into a more secure position, he lifted her into his arms, taking note of how delicate she felt, despite her alien features. He wasn't sure if it was the ship that had caused her condition or something else, but he couldn't leave her behind. With one last glance at the Chiton cruiser, Jonas began making his way back to the Ravenous, his old freighter. His thoughts were scattered. Who was she? Why was she here? But as he carried her to his ship, his focus remained on one thing: survival. When they finally made it back to the Ravenous, Jonas gently placed the woman on the medical bay's examination table. The rest of the crew had yet to return, and Jonas was alone with her for the moment. He hooked up her vitals to the ship's medical system, trying to stabilize her as best as he could. "What are you doing here?" he muttered as he worked, his hands moving quickly, trying to figure out just what was going on. As the minutes ticked by, the woman's eyes fluttered open. Jonas froze. For a brief moment, their gazes locked, and he felt something strange, a mixture of confusion, fear, and curiosity in her eyes. Her voice, weak but clear, broke the silence. "Why did you help me?" Jonas swallowed. This wasn't something he had planned for. "You were unconscious. You needed help." Her lips parted in shock. "But you didn't have to. You should have left me. I am no one." Jonas's brow furrowed. "Everyone deserves help." The alien woman gazed at him, as though trying to read him. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice now firmer, but with a hint of something Jonas couldn't quite place. "Then you must understand. I am no ordinary being." Jonas wasn't sure what to make of her words, but one thing was for sure. His discovery of the Chiton cruiser had just opened up an entirely new chapter in his life. And this woman, the strange alien who had been hiding in the wreckage, wasn't just an ordinary survivor. She was something more. The question was, what kind of secret was she hiding? And why had the Chiton cruiser carried her all the way out here, to the edge of space? Chapter 2. The Alien's Secret. Jonas stood over the woman, her eyes piercing as they locked onto his. There was something about the way she looked at him that made his skin crawl. She wasn't just any alien. The Chiton cruiser, her presence here, the whole situation, was too much to be a coincidence. But Jonas wasn't about to let fear take hold of him. He was a mechanic, and a good one. If there was a problem, he could solve it. He always had. "I didn't expect you to wake up so soon," Jonas said, breaking the silence. He tried to sound calm, but his voice had a slight tremor in it. The last thing he wanted was for the woman to think he was nervous. She was in a delicate state, and he needed her cooperation if he was going to get answers. Her lips curled into a faint smile, but there was an unmistakable sadness in her eyes. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, human." Jonas blinked, thrown off guard by her sudden shift in tone. Human. It wasn't the first time he'd heard that word, but hearing it from someone who wasn't human felt different. "What do you mean?" Jonas asked cautiously. He wiped his hands on his coveralls and sat on a nearby stool, trying to appear nonchalant. The ship hummed softly in the background, the familiar sounds of the Ravenous grounding him. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the precipice of something far bigger than he could comprehend. The alien woman took a deep breath before speaking again, her voice quieter now, but tinged with urgency. "I'm not just some stranded traveler. I am Ariana, of the Chiton, and you, Jonas McCabe, have just made a grave mistake by bringing me aboard your ship." The words hit Jonas like a ton of bricks. He had heard of the Chiton before. They were a mysterious, highly intelligent alien race. Not much was known about them. They were reclusive, rumored to possess incredible technology and powers that were beyond even human understanding. But they were also thought to be a thing of the past, fading into legend. To hear one of them speak to him, especially in the present tense, made everything feel surreal. "The Chiton," Jonas repeated, more to himself than to her. He was struggling to process the information, to make sense of it. "But I thought your people disappeared hundreds of years ago." Ariana's eyes darkened, and she gave a slight shake of her head. "The Chiton were not lost, Jonas. We chose to disappear. For the good of the galaxy, we sealed ourselves away from the rest of the universe. We chose isolation to protect the universe from a threat greater than you can imagine. But our secrets have never truly been hidden. Until now. Jonas sat up straighter. He had been expecting some answers, but this was something he hadn't been prepared for. The Chiton, hiding away, choosing to protect the galaxy? What kind of secrets did they carry? And why had she, of all people, been in the wreck of a Chiton cruiser? I don't understand, he said. If you knew the danger, why are you here? Why did you come out of hiding? Ariana's expression softened, and she closed her eyes for a moment, as though weighing her words carefully. The Tiburon, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Tiburon was the last key to unleashing the horror we've been trying to keep contained for centuries. The Tiburon's mission, the one it was built for, was to find a way to counteract the Chiton, a secret that not even we could fully comprehend. And once you found it, you unleashed everything. Jonas was stunned. The ship he had been called to salvage, the ship that had been thought of as a myth, was key to something far larger. A ship that not only carried secrets but a threat that was capable of destroying more than just planets. It could destroy entire civilizations. You're saying the Tiburon is a weapon? Jonas asked, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Worse than a weapon, Ariana replied. The Tiburon houses the essence of the void, a biomechanical construct we created to contain a creature from the void. It's an intelligence that is older than the Chiton themselves. It exists in the gaps between space and time, and it feeds on the energy of civilizations. We created it, and we locked it away. But the Tiburon was meant to be our failsafe. Without it, we have no control. Jonas shook his head, trying to make sense of everything. He was a mechanic, not an expert on ancient alien civilizations or interdimensional creatures, but the essence of the void, a creature capable of consuming entire civilizations, was a lot to swallow. His stomach tightened, but he fought the fear building in his chest. So the Tiburon, the ship, was a prison? He asked slowly, his voice tight. Ariana nodded. Yes, it was designed to hold the creature at bay, keeping it from escaping to the other realms. But when the Tiburon disappeared, when it was lost, everything changed. The void creature stirred, and we have no idea how far its reach has extended in the time since. It could already be awakening, Jonas. And if it is, there's no telling what we might face next. Jonas felt his heart race. He had been just a simple mechanic, minding his own business. He had no idea that this ship, this wreck he found, carried a creature with the power to consume reality itself. And you? Why are you here? Jonas asked, his voice shaky. What's your role in all of this? Ariana's eyes met his, her gaze intense. I was sent to ensure that the Tiburon never fell into the wrong hands. But it has, hasn't it? She looked at him, and Jonas could feel the weight of her words. Now, we have no choice but to find a way to recontain the creature. Together. Jonas stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the gravity of her words. She wasn't just an alien. She was part of a species with knowledge that Spandians, and somehow, he had become involved in something that could change the entire galaxy's future. His mind began racing, processing everything. He had never signed up for anything like this. He was just a mechanic, and yet somehow, he found himself at the center of a story that spanned centuries and threatened every living being in the universe. I didn't ask for this, Jonas said, his voice heavy. But I'm not going to leave you to face this alone. I'll help. I'll find a way to fix whatever went wrong. Ariana gave a faint smile, her eyes softening. That's why I'm here, Jonas. To help you understand. But the journey ahead will not be easy. The Tiburon has changed, and its defenses are only part of what lies ahead. The essence of the void is waking up. It's calling to us. Jonas took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing in determination. He had a job to do. And it wasn't just about fixing ships anymore. It was about saving the universe. As Ariana stared at him, her voice steady but urgent, she said one last thing. Let's begin. There's no time to waste. Chapter 3. Into the Void. The Ravenous hummed steadily as Jonas and Ariana worked side by side, preparing for the next phase of their journey. The ship's hull was sturdy, but the systems were old. And the more Jonas examined the ancient Chiton cruiser that had once been so pristine, the more he realized how decayed it had become. The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a time capsule, a relic of a past that had been buried by the Chiton themselves. Jonas stood over the control panel in the cockpit, his mind still racing from their previous conversation. The essence of the void, an ancient creature that existed outside the boundaries of known space, was not only a dangerous biomechanical entity, but a force of unimaginable power. It was capable of feeding off the energies of entire civilizations, draining them dry, leaving nothing but ashes in its wake. And now, the very ship Jonas had stumbled upon was tied to this cosmic terror. Ariana, sitting beside him, was focused, her hands moving over the controls with a calm precision that Jonas couldn't help but admire. She was Chiton. After all, she had grown up in a society that revered technology and knowledge that humanity could barely comprehend. But there was something about her that felt human too. It wasn't just her appearance, but her resolve. Her desire to protect the universe was palpable, and it drew Jonas in, making him feel a sense of purpose he hadn't had in a long time. Jonas, I need you to get the Tiburon's engines online. If we're going to move forward with the recontainment, we need to get to the Essence's containment unit. The ship's systems should still have power, but it's going to take both of us to get it functional. Ariana's voice cut through his thoughts, steady and clear. Jonas blinked, shaking off his lingering thoughts as he nodded. Understood. Let's get this ship moving. He headed toward the engineering section of the ship, where the main engines were housed. The corridors of the Tiburon seemed to stretch on forever, dark and foreboding, with only the hum of the failing power systems for company. The flickering lights created strange, shifting shadows on the walls, making it seem as though the ship itself was alive breathing in the dark. Jonas hated it. Every step he took in the Tiburon's belly made him feel more like a trespasser in a forgotten mausoleum. But he had no choice. The essence of the void was waking, and every second they delayed meant more lives at risk. Jonas reached the engineering room and immediately began working on the ship's reactors. The systems were designed for deep space travel, but they hadn't been properly maintained in centuries. The Chiton technology was unlike anything Jonas had ever worked on. It was as if the ship itself had been a living, breathing entity. There were no conventional wires or motors, only biomechanical conduits and neural interfaces that required him to adapt his usual methods. He sighed in frustration. How do they keep doing this? He thought. The ship felt like it was mocking him. Despite everything he knew, the technology was just too foreign. He couldn't help but feel that they were in way over their heads. Ariana's voice came through his comm unit, sharp and direct. Jonas, hurry. The essence is moving. We need to get to it before it awakens fully. You need to get those engines running. Now. Jonas cursed under his breath and set to work with renewed focus. He examined the power couplings, rerouting energy to vital systems. But it was clear that even with his expertise, the Chiton ship resisted him. There was something off. The ship didn't just want to hibernate in peace. It seemed to be fighting back, almost as if it didn't want to be disturbed. He wiped sweat from his brow and pushed forward. Every second they wasted was another second the essence had to reassert its control. Come on, come on. Jonas muttered, the neural interface suddenly lighting up in front of him. His hand hovered over it as the power surged through the conduits. The ship shuddered, and for a moment, Jonas thought they were too late. The lights flickered in a way that made him think the ship itself was going to shut down. But then it happened. With a sudden pulse of power, the Tiburon's engines roared to life, their energy vibrating through the very core of the ship. Jonas's heart skipped a beat as the ship's systems hummed to life. The lights, although dim, flickered on. The power grid was fully restored. The ship was no longer just a dead husk, it was alive again. Ariana, we're good to go. Engines are online. Jonas shouted over his comms, adrenaline flooding his veins. He could hear the hum of the power systems reverberating through the walls as if the ship itself were awakening from a long slumber. Good work. Now get to the containment unit. We have a long way to go before this is over. Ariana's voice crackled through the comm system. There was no time for celebration. Not now. Jonas moved quickly, now that the engines were online, guiding the Tiburon through the labyrinth of corridors. He followed the map Ariana had provided, making his way to the containment chamber that held the essence of the void, the heart of the ship, where the truth about the Tiburon's purpose lay hidden. As Jonas and Ariana arrived at the containment chamber, the temperature dropped noticeably. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of ancient knowledge, and it was as if the air itself was charged with the resonance of untold power. The door to the chamber was locked, but Ariana easily overrode the security systems with a swipe of her hand. The doors opened with a hiss, revealing the heart of the ship. Inside, there was an alien core, unlike anything Jonas had ever seen. It was a floating orb, its surface pulsing with an eerie light. The containment chamber was surrounded by ancient alien technology, mechanical arms, and energy barriers that seemed to flicker with unnatural power. It wasn't just a containment system. It was a prison designed to hold something alive, a creature capable of shaking the very foundation of the universe. Jonas stepped forward, hesitant. The power within the orb was palpable, an energy that made his skin crawl. "This is it, isn't it?" Jonas asked, his voice low and full of awe. Ariana nodded gravely. "Yes, this is the essence of the void, the creature the Chiton created to protect the galaxy from forces beyond imagination. For centuries, it has been contained here, but if the ship's power wasn't restored, the creature would have broken free." Jonas felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The orb in front of them wasn't just a vessel. It was a cage, holding back an unimaginable force of destruction. How did the Tiburon get involved with this? Why was it built to hold something like this? Ariana's eyes darkened. The Tiburon was the last line of defense. We built it to contain the essence, to ensure that the creature never escaped into the galaxy. But over time, the Chiton lost their way. Our people didn't believe in the threat anymore, and eventually, the Tiburon was abandoned. But the creature never forgot. Jonas moved closer to the orb, his hands shaking slightly. He knew what they were up against now. Whatever had been unleashed, the galaxy was in serious danger, and it was up to them to stop it before the essence consumed everything. "Let's finish this," Jonas said, looking at Ariana. "We can't let this thing out." Chapter 4. The Final Choice. The containment chamber was alive with the pulsing hum of ancient technology, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the walls and into Jonas's very bones. The essence of the void lay before him in its crystalline prison, its surface glowing like a living star, casting an eerie, blue light over the room. Jonas stood in awe of the entity, his mind struggling to comprehend its true nature. It wasn't just a weapon or a creature. It was something more, a force that had existed long before the Chiton, long before humanity, a force that could reshape the very fabric of the universe if it was set free. He turned to Ariana, his pulse quickening as he realized the gravity of the choice before them. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Ariana's face was set, her eyes hard with determination, but there was a sadness in them too, a weight that came from knowing the truth. She had been part of the civilization that had built the Tiburon, part of the ancient race that had imprisoned this cosmic force. She knew the danger better than anyone, and she also knew the price of failure. "There is no more time, Jonas." Her voice was steady, but the flicker of fear in her eyes betrayed the stakes. The essence of the void can never be allowed to escape. The Tiburon was built to keep it contained, but the ship's systems have been damaged beyond repair. The only way to ensure the creature is sealed away forever is to activate the self-destruct sequence and destroy the ship. Jonas's heart dropped. He had felt it, the weight of the situation, the choice they faced. The Tiburon, the essence of the void, the entire galaxy, it was all tied together in this final, impossible decision. "Self-destruct?" Jonas repeated, his voice hoarse. You want to destroy the only ship that can contain this creature? What if we're wrong? What if we can still fix it?" Ariana stepped closer, her face softening. "There is no fixing it. The ship systems were only ever meant to hold the creature for a finite amount of time. What we're dealing with is more than just a malfunction. The ship is dying, and the essence is stirring. If we don't act now, there will be no more choices left. It's either destroy it now, or let it consume everything." Jonas felt the weight of her words sink in. Destroy the Tiburon, the very ship that had been his salvation, the one that had brought him into this unimaginable mess. He would have to make the ultimate sacrifice not just for his own life, but for everyone in the galaxy. There was no other way. But as the red countdown lights began to flash on the console in front of him, Jonas hesitated. The thought of destroying the Tiburon, of cutting off the galaxy's last hope, felt like a gut-wrenching choice. Could he really do this? Could he really pull the trigger on the galaxy's future? What happens when we do this? Jonas asked quietly, his voice shaking slightly as he glanced at Ariana. She looked at him with those steady, knowing eyes. If we activate the self-destruct, the essence will be sealed away, and the ship will be destroyed in the process. It will never escape. We will make sure the universe remains safe, even if it means our own lives will be forfeit. Jonas took a deep breath, feeling his chest tighten. This was at the final moment. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He wasn't just a man with a ship. He was now part of something far greater, something that would change the fate of everything he knew. He turned to face the console, his fingers hovering over the self-destruct button. The ship's countdown was already ticking, and every passing second felt like an eternity. Behind him, Ariana's presence was a quiet strength, a reminder of the choice they had made together. In a moment of clarity, Jonas understood that there was no other way. He had seen enough in his lifetime to know when it was time to let go, and now, more than ever, he understood that this was that moment. He wasn't just sacrificing the Tiburon. He was ensuring that the universe would be free from the essence and the void it represented. He was saving the future. His hand slammed down on the button. The ship began to shake violently as the countdown sped up. The power reserves began draining, and the lights flickered wildly as the self-destruct sequence activated. Jonas felt a deep, bone-chilling rumble as the Tiburon began to implode in on itself, collapsing as if the essence itself was being sealed away forever. Ariana stepped forward and placed her hand on Jonas's shoulder, her voice quiet but full of resolve. "You've done it. You've saved us all." Jonas didn't reply. He could feel the heat beginning to radiate through the walls of the ship. The ship was collapsing, and the essence of the void was being buried, sealed away forever. The explosion was cataclysmic. The Tiburon detonated, its power core erupting in a massive explosion of energy. The shockwave rippled outward, disintegrating the surrounding debris in a fiery burst of destruction. For a long moment, Jonas felt as though the universe itself had stopped. There was nothing but silence, a quiet, still moment in time where everything hung in the balance. And then, the ship's systems powered down, and the hum of the engines ceased. The room grew still, the remnants of the ship's self-destruction settling into a deathly silence. Jonas exhaled deeply, blinking in disbelief. He turned to look at Ariana, who stood by his side, her expression unreadable. "It's done," she whispered, almost to herself. "The galaxy is safe." Jonas nodded slowly, a sense of relief washing over him, though the weight of the decision still hung heavy in his chest. He had sacrificed everything to protect the universe. And while he didn't know what the future held, he was certain of one thing: he had done the right thing. The Ravenous floated silently through space, untouched by the chaos they had just unleashed. In the quiet after the storm, Jonas turned to Ariana once more. "So, what happens now?" Jonas asked. Ariana smiled softly, her eyes gentle. "Now, we move forward. We live. And we carry the weight of what we've done." And together, in the silent aftermath of their sacrifice, they stared into the infinite expanse of space, knowing that they had saved the galaxy from an ancient force far beyond their understanding.